Welcome to Advocacy in Action, everybody. If you just arrived, I have a poll up. If you wouldn't mind taking a minute or two to complete that poll. We're just trying to collect some information to make us better at this meeting, and we appreciate that from you all. We are here to serve you, so we just need your info. And we'll just give it one more minute. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. And close it up here. I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. All right, welcome everybody. I'm Sadie Everett, and I'm the director of the Regional Autism Advisory Council here at the University of Cincinnati. This is a new meeting that Amanda Tipkemper and I launched in February. We meant for it to be monthly, but March got crazy, sorry. So we're trying to do it now. So we're back in the saddle here, and we have a great presenter. Amanda is presenting today, and she is going to be presenting on the ABCs of the IEP. And our next meeting is, so we do have a cadence to this meeting. We are going to be hosting this meeting on the fourth Thursday of the month. But we're rotating the times because when we did our first meeting, it was all, some people liked the morning, some people liked middle of the day, and some people liked the evening. So we're just going to rotate that time, but still keep it at that fourth Thursday of the month. And we will record all sessions. And right now I have a YouTube channel that I'm housing these, or really the first one, but I will be housing these, and then I will find a place on our UC website to house them as well. And I will be sharing that out in my newsletter and all that good stuff. So I think that was it. That was all I had to do today, right, Amanda? I am going to turn it over to Amanda to get started.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amanda Tipkemper. So happy to have this space and to be working with Sadie in the Regional Autism Advisory Council and the IDD Center to offer this to our community. So the purpose of the monthly events, we had originally thought, this would be a great space to offer free advice, advocacy, support for families who are navigating, systems. And the original idea was around special education, but Sadie and I've gotten input since we've started this that's broader than that. So we'll be just basically marketing it to whatever our audience is hoping to learn and where the support needs are. At this time of year, you're probably aware if you have a kid in the school, it's a pretty busy time of year, but it is not too late to advocate. And a lot of times it feels like it is, and some families are feeling pretty worried and stressed out about the end of the school year, the summer placement decisions next year, and there's still time. So we're going to go over basics. This is not meant to go into great detail about any specific issues. So I'm not going to be talking about extended school year in great detail, but we'll be talking about some basic rights that are going to help you and provide you with guidance. Let me see. How do I go to the next slide? Sadie. I want to do it. Hold on just a second, guys. Sorry.
You're good. I'm not the one
really
to ask
sure
though. An arrow, the arrow key, does that work?
That was good. Yes, no, it was not working, but I found another one. So my introduction Oh, come on. All right, it worked. Sorry, my buttons did not want to work. So my name is Amanda Tipkemper. I've been a special education administrator working in the disability community of Greater Cincinnati for my whole entire career. Started out as the executive director at the Cincinnati Center for Autism, moved on to the Children's Home of Cincinnati, which is now Best Point Education and Behavioral Health, where I was the principal at the Heights Center and then the superintendent of all education services, overseeing both the autism and IDD campus and the behavior health campuses. And now, as of last year, 2024, I started my own company. I'm self-employed, and the name of that company, surprise, is Amanda Tipkemper LLC. And again, been 20 plus year in special education, disability advocacy. I could go on more and more about that, but I've worked, when I was at Cincinnati Center for Autism, I worked as a IEP advocate as well and did quite a bit of work. I was not able to do that when I was at the Children's Home in Best Point. It was a conflict of interest, and I'm happy to be moving back into the world of advocacy. So, my disclaimer here is that I am not a special education lawyer, nor do I play one on TV. This is not legal advice. This is lay advocacy advice. This is information that you can find yourself. I will tell you that by the end of this, I hope that you're going to have a somewhat good idea of where to go to understand processes, to know your basic rights, to know the basics of dispute resolution, and then to have these resources that can work to meet individual needs. Now, I know just by looking at the audience, I recognize some of you that some of you are parents and some of you are professionals. So this is to arm you with as much information as possible and also to just get you familiar and comfortable with this space as a place where we can talk about these things. So another thing that I want to say as a disclaimer is that the information I'm going to be presenting is for individuals that are in public schools, and there are variations when it comes to individuals that are in private schools and also anyone who's accessing the Autism Scholarship and the John Peterson Scholarship. So just bear that in mind as we do this. I'm going to talk about processes very lightly because the processes can be very overwhelming. Lots of semantics and terminology and difficult to navigate. I'm going to focus more on basic rights because that's really where it comes down to families understanding and being able to navigate those in the dispute resolution. All right, so one of my favorite things to share with people that a lot of people do not have memorized or don't even know exist, and it's, I think, just a beautiful statement. It's in the law, IDEA law. Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. Improving educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy of ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. I just think it's a beautiful statement. I will tell you that at one point I actually put this at the top of every agenda that I created for meetings and would reference it and quote it as needed if I needed to. So I'm gonna just touch onto this very lightly because I feel like the picture is just so representative. You know, when we talk about processes in special education, look at the picture, guys. This is an actual document. This is an official document from the Department of Education that talks about the Ohio ETR process. And look at the lines. There's colored lines, there's different colors, there's dotted lines. They're going all over the place. If you feel confused by the processes, it's okay. All right. If you have to create a flow chart that looks like this and actually distribute it to people, then you should be confused. All right. So this is just an example of the process for requesting to have your child evaluated to see if they even have a disability, right? So the first step is that school has to identify whether or not they should start with intervention. And this is called different things in different settings, but it's response to intervention or multi-tiered systems of supports. It's basically before we go into special education, or have we crossed all our I or crossed all our T's and dotted our I's in terms of putting interventions in place. sometimes the team can easily say, yes, we've already done that, and we can move forward with the evaluation. So the first step is to request, and then for the team to identify if there should be an intervention or evaluation. From there, we request the evaluation, the family has to give consent for the evaluation, and then there's the evaluation procedure. In that process, there is also a planning meeting where we talk about all the assessments. And for families who are new to special education, this is all Greek, right? And a lot of the terminology, the assessments, the evaluations, it's all very Greek as well. And then once the initial evaluation team report is completed, then they determine whether or not the student is going to qualify for special education. And then there's next steps from there. So this is just one. This is just one of the many processes that require a flow chart that would be as confusing as the one that you see on your screen right now. So I'm not going to get greatly deep into the processes today because there are so many. They are very confusing. I just want to validate for the families that are on this call that it is a confusing process. There's lots of terminology, there's lots of steps, there's lots of opportunities to get confused about where you are in the process. And for the professionals on the call, remember that our families did not go to school for this. Our families did not decide, I would like to have a child with special needs. I sign up, and therefore I'm going to educate myself. Our families did not decide to be special educators, and they did not decide to be in this field. We, the professionals, decided to be in this field. So it's really important that as we work with our families, we understand that and we value them as the expert. We make sure that we're using plain language as much as possible and we're explaining our acronyms. And for families on the other side of that, never, ever, ever be scared to ask a question. Again, most of you did not go to school for this. Most of you did not decide to sign up for this. It is okay if you have questions. Language matters, though, and semantics can be tricky. And I've been in plenty of meetings where semantics has shut down a meeting. So semantics meaning the meaning of words, right? So, or how we're applying words in particular situations. And one of those examples is going to be the free and appropriate public education if the semantics around that is the word appropriate, right? And we have to focus on using the word appropriate and needed. And we need to veer away from best, desirable. Those are not words that we should use in IEP meetings or special education processes. So just bear in mind, not all people at the table know the legal process and terminology. I'm going to give you another surprise. This might blow your mind. Your special educator who's sitting at the table a lot of times does not know all of these processes and does not know, especially if they are a newer special educator, they may not be familiar with all these processes. And they certainly are getting used to how to apply it in their district as well. So every district has a different application as well. What we're going to talk about today is not how districts apply these rules, use these processes. We're going to talk about the basics across the board and federally. All right. These are federal things. These are not, this is how one district does it versus another. All right. So the required participants, and this will blow your mind. I cannot tell you how many meetings I've been to that have not had the required participants. If your student is over the age of 14, they need to be invited to the meeting. I was an administrator for years, and I probably really irritated the heck out of the people that I oversaw because I very much insisted that these students should be sitting at the table when we talk about them. How are you supposed to work on something if you don't know that it's an issue, right? And a lot of times that is what is happening. The parent is a required participant. The district rep, and what I recommend for families is to identify who that district rep is when they start the meeting. The intervention specialist and the general educator, these are all required participants, all right? Now there are gray areas around this as well. If you're dealing with someone who is in foster care, or if you're dealing with someone who doesn't have a biological parent or is in transition, there are always going to be, gray areas, but this is the basics, right? Your required participant should be at the meeting. Now, this is the most important piece. You have to have a district rep at that meeting in order to confirm services, in order to change services. If there is not a district rep at the meeting and someone says, I really think your kid could use a lot more occupational therapy than they're getting right now, then there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. All right. You can talk all day long if a district rep isn't there, because the district rep is the one who holds the purse. The district rep is the one who understands the rules and the processes of the district. They're the ones who are going to say it's either okay or not okay. They're the only one who has the authority to say that it is okay or not okay, ultimately. Parents have to provide permission and signed excusal prior to the meeting. Now, I know that there's parents right now who are like, that is not happening. And I know it's not happening. It's not happening consistently, but you should be asking for that. If there's someone at the meeting who is required, the parents have to provide permission prior to the meeting. All right, so now we're going to get into the basic rights. Sadie, do we have any questions, comments, concerns? Everybody can hear me? I'm not talking too fast.
I think we're okay. There is a comment here. As a heads up, Ohio is currently asking for feedback on forms related to the ETR and IEP. If you want to provide feedback, you can. There's a link in the chat. If you scroll down, I use this side by side to see everything more clearly. You can attend webinars to provide feedback, and or you can fill out a Google form to provide feedback as well. I believe they are requesting information until May 23rd. Okay, that's great. Thanks for sharing that, Maureen.
Yes, absolutely. I signed up for the stakeholder review meetings. The IEP meeting is already full, just so you know. So anyone who wanted to attend that meeting, if you haven't already, it sounds like it's full. So make sure you use those other the resources that Maureen referenced. So these are the basic rights. I've been using these for years. I have been training on these for years. They are based on case law. And case law means that someone ahead of us, the trailblazers ahead of us, went to court and got this confirmed by the due process, by a judge. It is now case law, and it's federal case law, which means that it applies across the board. It isn't something that's just specific to Ohio. All right. So these are 5 general principles that clearly review, that clearly emerge. And the number one is that all a student's unique needs must be addressed. All a student's unique needs must be addressed, not just his or her academic needs. And this was a change that was made years ago to clarify that it needs to be academic and functional needs. Go back to that purpose statement, right? Remember that purpose statement? It's not just focused on academic needs. It wants people to be self-sufficient, economically contributing, right? So with that in mind, if you have a child that you want to work on potty training with, you can work on potty training. Okay. This is just an example again, but if you think about it, you have a kid who's in school Monday through Friday for at least 6.5 hours a day. Who has the most opportunity to work on potty training? Most parents, right? Like you realize this in your gut and you get it. But a lot of families, when they ask for this, get a lot of pushback. You need that support. You need that consistency. You need that generalization. And when the kid is in school all day, that is the opportunity, right? So all of a student's unique needs must be addressed, not just her or his academic needs. Another thing I want you to bear in mind with this is that this does not mean that I have worked with students who have significant global developmental delays. And when I say global developmental delays, I'm saying they don't have language, they have an intellectual disability, they have physical, motor impairments. We can't address everything in an IEP, right? Or else you get more concerned with the document and the papers and less concerned about the student who is right in front of you. So it's important to prioritize. I always recommend, and this is again, Amanda's recommendation is that if there's an issue of care, safety, and welfare, we start there. If you have a kid who is engaging in self-injurious behavior, if you have a kid who is eloping from the building or running into the road, if you have a kid who has any sort of a safety issue, that should be prioritized over anything else, in my opinion. The other piece to that is just prioritizing those academic needs. IEPs are a lot of documentation. I will tell you, as you know, as an administrator who oversaw this process, it takes at least a day for a quality IEP to be written by an intervention specialist, at least a day. And a lot of intervention specialists are taking more than that to write these documents. And the same thing comes with progress reports. If you have a really great intervention specialist who's taken really awesome data, um, it takes a lot of time, all right, to compile that data and then to create a progress report. So if you have an IEP and there are 20 plus goals in there, your intervention specialist is spending more time with that document than they are with your child. And that's just logical. Just think about it logically, all right? And we want our intervention specialists and our related service providers to be focusing on the kids. So prioritizing things is important. The availability of services may not be considered. So what does this mean? What this means is that and this is the most practical and as it occurs all the time. If your speech pathologist is pregnant and they go out on maternity leave, that does not mean that your child has to just not have speech services for a period of time. All right. Now, again, when we think about logistics, easier said than done. All right. Again, I've been an administrator. I know how hard it is to find speech language pathologists and occupational therapists. But at the same time, you and your child, if they qualify for those services, they must be provided. All right. So the availability of services may not be considered in writing the IEP. If a service is needed, it must be written on the IEP, and if the district does not have it available, it must be provided by another agency. So an example of this is if your speech pathologist goes out on maternity leave and there is not another speech pathologist at the district available, then you can contract with an outside provider who will provide those services in the interim. Not ideal. I realize we would love to have consistency, but having the service is also incredibly important. So one of the earliest of all agency rulings mandated that the availability of services be disregarded in writing the IEP. This principle has been reiterated repeatedly by the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services. So bear that in mind. The next piece, a basic right, the district must provide the services listed. This is a legally binding commitment of resources. This also means if it isn't written down, then it's not guaranteed. All right. It is a legally binding document. So you're like, Amanda, you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Oh my gosh, you just said don't have an IEP that has 22 goals. And then you're saying that you have to have everything written down in order for it to be legally binding. Again, I realize every single situation is going to be very much individualized because it's the individualized education plan. But you have to have it in writing. And I'm going to give you an example. We're going to go back to potty training. And I've worked with kids again from pre-diagnosis all the way through graduation and transition services. But this is just a good example. And it was one of my early ahas as well. So we had worked with a district. The student had made great progress with potty training after the district had initially refused to work on it. They actually made incredible progress throughout the school year, and the family was really excited. The teachers and EAs, I mean, it takes a huge burden off of teachers and EAs. Nobody really loves changing diapers, after a certain age. And we got to the summer, and well, first of all, the district, when we requested that they write this in the IEP, the district's like, we're going to work on this anyway. It's just a part of the day. It's so natural, it happens multiple times. We don't have to write this down in the IEP as a goal. And then when it came to qualifying the kid for extended school year services, he did qualify for extended school year services because of the data, but because we didn't have a goal written in there specific to potty training, they were legally not required to work on potty training over the summer. So that was a big learning curve for me. In terms of how we write things. So if it's something that you want to see consistently worked on, if it's something that you feel needs to be targeted for extended school year services, it really does need to be documented. And let me see. The next one, I know this shouldn't be a huge surprise. Hold on just a second. IEPs must be individualized. And we've heard this for years and years and years. I will tell you that there are still IEP goal banks out there. IEP goal banks are basically the opposite of a goal being individualized, but If they're used correctly, I'm not completely demonizing goal banks. If they're used correctly, you use them for inspiration, right? And then you take that information and you individualize it to the student. And most importantly, you individualize the criteria, the mastery criteria, and how you're measuring progress to the student. That should be individualized for every student. There is no student who is on an IEP that learns exactly at the same rate as another student. There's no student on an IEP who retains knowledge exactly the same as another student. But how many of you out there right now says that a student is going to master something at 80%? How many of you have it as 4 to 5 trials? I could keep going because I guarantee that there's plenty of people out there that have the same exact criteria in their IEPs. So the same goals, the same content areas, the same discipline, or the same amounts of therapy on many IEPs reveals a violation of this individualization requirement. Easy for me to say. I need more coffee too, Sadie. So I'll give you an example of this. There is one district out there that many years ago had occupational therapists. There was a lot of occupational therapists, and they had meetings in which they determined what the standard level of service was that was provided to students in that district. That is illegal. You are not allowed to do that. All right. It should be individualized to each and every student. But I will tell you that there are many of you that probably have 120 minutes of direct service for speech on your IEP. There are many of you out there that have 90 minutes of service monthly on your IEP for an occupational therapy because for some reason, somewhere along the line, 120 became standardized for speech services and 90 minutes became standardized for occupational therapy services. So again, just make sure that you're having those conversations that are specific to your kids. When we're talking about services, what does your individual student or the student that you are supporting need? How do they learn and how should we be measuring that progress? So when, I was working at the Cincinnati Center for Autism, I'll give you an example. One of the things that we noticed was that we really needed to monitor skills, especially with younger learners, for generalization across individuals, across environments, and across stimuli, right? So what we were learning was that we had students that would master concepts with Sadie, and then I would start working with them, and it was like starting all over again, right? Or Sadie and I would be using one set of materials and we introduced another set of flashcards and it was like learning the skill all over again. So we wanted to make sure to put in those IEPs that that was something that we were monitoring to ensure that these particular students and their particular learning style was being recognized and being integrated into the IEP.
We have a question from Sarah.
Alrighty.
Are there any tools to objectively assess the need for therapy?
Which kind of therapy, Sarah? And there are, yes.
Speech and OT.
Absolutely. There's a bunch of tools and assessments out there, and you should be requesting norm referenced so that it's comparing to same age peers. So, or, equivalency. And then those assessments will actually look at the individual versus his peers in a variety of different areas as well. So there are speech assessments out there for articulation. There are speech assessments out there for socialization. There are so many different speech. I could go on and on and on, but there are a
Oh,
bunch of speech assessments. So it's based on the needs of the student as well.
she meant also for the time for the therapy, like as, to objectively assess how much time for the different types
Mm,
of therapy,
that's
90
a
versus the
great
100.
question.
I know, I was
No, Sarah,
wondering the
that's
same
great.
thing, like, is,
Hmm.
yeah, how do they come up with the amount of minutes needed?
Hmm.
Yeah, uh,
It's standard.
yeah.
Now, I will tell you that there's a caseload calculator that's provided by the speech the speech and OT like certification organizations, and they really so this is another complication. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but okay, the Department of Education has laws the federal government has laws, and then those individual certification boards. So whoever oversees a speech language pathologist, they have specific rules and guidelines. And then an occupational therapist has specific rules and guidelines. They don't all talk to each other. All right. When they come up with these guys, like the Department of Education is like, hey, I'm going to call you, I'm going to call ASHA and see what they think speech pathologists should do and make sure that our rules align with their rules, because I wouldn't, want them to have any stress and dealing with the conflicts of those rules. There's a lot of gray area in the world of special education. All right, as many black and white processes, because every student is completely different. There's a lot of gray area, and this requires negotiation. So what it comes down to is having really good data, Sarah, and then also having good progress monitoring tools, and then going back to your team and saying, based on the progress or the lack of progress, I think we really need to look at the number of minutes. And that's how you would go about it. And if the data isn't telling you that, then you need to fix the data, right? And you need to talk to the team about, we need to take better data so that I have a better idea of my child's progress. Hopefully that helped a little bit. And if anybody has any tools or ideas, I hope you all keep plopping those in the chat and sharing with each other. One of the most valuable tools that you will have in this field is other families when it comes to this advocacy. And I'm going to tell you another story here in just a second. So other families talking to each other, and especially other families across districts. And as an IEP advocate, I worked in a lot of districts across the tri-state area. Um, and even as an administrator, right, I've worked in over 30 districts in the greater Cincinnati area, and there is a lot of variability in the interpretation and the application. But if you talk to a family who is going to a school in the north, and you talk to in Ohio, and you go to a family who's going to school in the south, they are still dictated by Ohio and the federal law, right? So if you hear that a kid is getting 10 weeks of extended school year services in another district, and their one-on-one aide is attending with them, then they qualified for that. And it is a valid thing for you to be like, well, I wonder why that kid's so much like my kid. I wonder why he qualified and why my student didn't qualify. So just having that knowledge is power, and asking those questions is important, right? So I'm aware of this happening in another district. Is there a reason why that happens and it doesn't happen here? Now, I will tell you that over the years, districts have gotten funding to be able to provide summer services and summer programs. And COVID allowed us to offer summer programs that were not ESY, but it got very, very, very confusing for families to distinguish between what was ESY and what was COVID summer services. My last piece on this, on the basic rights, before we move on to the next slide, all of the components of the IEP are required by law. So the goals and objectives, specific special education related services, all of those things must be present. And the conversation around extended school year services must happen. It is not legal for the district to skip over that, all right? But what happens is, a lot of times, because of the language, the semantics, the terminology, and just the overall process, it can get skipped over pretty quickly. And I will tell you that there are some that can do a really good job of talking around and through that, and parents don't even realize until the end of the meeting. They're like, oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about ESY. So just go in with an agenda. This is going to be my next step. The format of IEPs across the country, I wanted to make a note of this, can vary wildly. Wildly. Kentucky IEPs look completely different than Ohio IEPs. Completely different. It is hard for me to even find information because they look so completely different. And to Maureen's point, that format might be changing because they're reviewing all of that right now. It's under review. Sadie, I'm going to take a pause and see if there's any other questions or comments that I should be addressing.
Yes. Okay. So Maureen dropped a resource in the chat for us. Thank you, Maureen. Brandy has a question. I'm interested in this for my littles, and I don't know how to go about it. Will you talk about this?
Yep, I will talk about this, Brandy.
Mhm.
I will. I'll get to that. So Anything else, Sadie?
That's it for now,
All
unless
right.
anyone feels moved.
So meeting preparation. How do we get ready for these meetings? And this is any meeting. This is an ESY meeting. This is a IEP meeting. This is your ETR meeting that happens every 3 years. You don't have to have, ETR is every 3 years and IEP is every year, but you can have meetings with your IEP team more frequently than once a year. And I do actually recommend that. I just heard recently that a parent teacher conference meeting in a local district is only 15 minutes. 15 minutes for a kid on an IEP is not enough time. All right. So it's okay to ask for more time and it's okay to bring your IEP team together more than once a year. So meeting preparation, make sure you confirm the purpose of the meeting. There's nothing worse than coming into a meeting thinking that it's going to be an IEP review and it's actually talking about behavior issues, right? Request documentation to review prior. This is something that I really, really push. It is hard, really difficult to review documentation, process it, and deal with your emotions all at the same time in a meeting. All right. And when you are the parent of a kid with special needs, it's really hard to remove your emotions from those meetings. All right. And that's okay. All right. That is your kid. That is how you're supposed to feel, right? So request that documentation so you can review it prior, so you can take notes, um, and then make those notes, right? And then create agenda items based on that. Now, some people will choose to send that to the meeting prior to the meeting, or I'm sorry, to the team prior to the meeting. Some people will choose not to do that. It just depends on the team, the dynamic, the relationships. If I want the meeting notes and if I want the information ahead of time, right, to review, then I want to give them the same opportunity and give them my notes and my information to review ahead of time. Use active listening strategies throughout. I'm not going to go into this, but you can Google active listening strategies when someone says something. So your student isn't going to qualify for ESY. So what I'm hearing you say is that my student isn't qualifying for extended school year services. And just repeating those things back, right? Ask for clarification, definitions, acronym explanations, and process walkthroughs. It's okay. Again, families, parents, caregivers, support people, you are not trained special educators, all right? You should not be expected to know these processes, and it is okay to ask questions. You should be asking questions. Identify action items before the end of the meeting. We should review the action items and the responsible parties. Sometimes these meetings can go really fast. Sometimes people will try to make them go really fast. So any opportunity you have to make sure that you slow down and say, just want to make sure I understand what we're doing next. Or at the end of the meeting saying, can we review our takeaways? And if I'm supposed to do anything, or you can say, what's my homework? Use your sense of humor if you have a sense of humor. Use your personality in these meetings to engage your team. Um, Identify action items and responsible parties, and then review those meeting notes and request any amendments to those notes. This is another thing that families often don't know that they can do. Parents, caregivers, support people, if you review the meeting notes. So I'll give you an example. I'm not going by an IEP advocate anymore because advocate is a dirty word, right? But I am a consultant and I try really hard to work with teams and serve as a bridge, right? Because I was an administrator and I understand the logistics behind things, right? But I also feel very strongly that we need to do better and that we need to be serving these kids better. So I try to serve as that bridge, right? But what I've noticed is that sometimes people, so for example, someone was like, the parents advocate was in a meeting. So I will go back and say, can you please put that the parents consultant was in the meeting? I know it's words, it's semantics, but they're important to me as well. So um, you can review meeting notes and request any amendments at any time. So if you look at those notes and you feel like it's not an accurate representation, you can do that during the meeting. You can do that after the meeting. But those notes should be reflective of what happened in the meeting.
Amanda,
So, yeah, I'm going to
you may have
pause. Yep.
you may have said this, but I was multitasking. Families are allowed to bring anyone. It doesn't have to be an advocate. It could be a friend.
Oh my gosh, that was great.
It
Hmm.
could be anyone. Sometimes somebody that you trust. So somebody that could just take notes for you. So while you're
Hmm.
listening, your friend is taking notes for you so that you can, refer back and just focus on what's going on in the meeting.
And that's, yes, exactly, Sadie. And I was getting ready to go into that. So, um, before we get into dispute resolution, that is one of the points I was going to make. So, number one, keep your cool. Try to keep your cool. And again, I understand that it's really difficult when it's your baby. Even if your baby is 16 years old and growing facial hair, it's your baby. All right. And parents are the advocates and the squeaky wheel. And if you are there and you're at that meeting, I'm going to tell you that I appreciate you and thank you for being there. All right. So keep your cool or take a break. And it's okay to take a break too. If things are getting a little difficult, heated, if you're feeling emotional and you just need a breather, it's okay. Another thing is that it's okay to say no. This is one of the things that I like when I was working with the families as an IEP advocate. The one thing that I really wanted to do was empower families so that they could take this over for me. I didn't want to be their advocate forever. I wanted families to have those tools, and that's why we're here today, right? It is okay to say no. It is okay to disagree. It is okay to say, I don't think I agree with that. And it is also one of the cheapest things that you can do. All right. And we'll get into that again. Get it in writing, get everything in writing, get everything in writing before and after meetings. If you have someone drop off, if at pick up or drop off, if someone says something like, oh, I'd really like to see the, I'd really like to see your kid getting more speech services. Again, like just follow up in writing. And then to Sadie's point, this is my last point on this meeting preparation, bring a witness. Now, I used to say back in the day, if you're on your way to your meeting and you realize you don't have anybody coming, just pick up somebody. Just pick up anybody. Stop by Starbucks and be like, "You look nice today. Here's a clipboard. I need your help." But and it's a joke and it's not a joke. You bringing a witness, whether it be your neighbor, whether it be your sister, whether it be someone from church, whether it be a coworker, is the cheapest and easiest thing that you can do that will make you feel supported, right? Will help you not feel as scrambled because you're like, there's somebody else to Sadie's point. There's someone else here listening. And also the most wonderful thing is if it's another person who's not a special educator, they can be like, what does that acronym mean? Do you know what this means? I don't know what anything means. And just again reminding the team, speak in plain talk. Not everybody's a special educator or a speech language pathologist. Like we need to make sure that we're using language that our families can understand so they can really be a part of this team. Um, so
Amanda.
bring a witness, absolutely bring a witness, and then we'll talk about the different layers of witnesses that you can bring. Go ahead, Sadie.
Amanda. Okay, so Brandy's asking that the role of parent advocates, parent mentors, are they specifically supposed to be supporting the families or the school, or what are your thoughts on that? And I just want to plug that next month we're going to have a panel of parent mentors to discuss their role and their experiences in the schools. So more of that to come, but I'll let Amanda chime in here.
Mhm. Yes. So we're getting into it. So Brandy, just give me a second so I can get through these slides because we're going into dispute resolution and some different pieces that are going to address that. All right. So there are lots of different paths that you can go down. And there are different people that you can bring to your meeting. So to Brandy's point, there are parent mentors. Not every district, I believe, maybe even if a district doesn't have a parent mentor, they can work with their county ESC. There's a couple of different resources. So the role of the parent mentor, depending on the district, um, number one, the parent mentor is paid by the district. So everyone needs to bear that in mind. Every mentor is a human being, so they are an individual as well. So how they operate in that role is going to be really different. It's also going to be different based on the district that they are in because the district is so neat. But they are paid by the district. They're there to be a resource and a peer to parents who are going through the special education process. They are not meant to be advocates. They will help you understand what your rights are, but they more than likely are not going to push back, at least publicly in a meeting in it to a district. Now, I know parent mentors. I know plenty of parent mentors, and I will tell you that there's a lot of them having conversations behind the scenes that our families are not aware of. All right. So if they see something that's happening that they don't agree with, I know that a lot of the parent mentors are are addressing that, but they're not going to be able to do that in a meeting typically because they are an employee of the district. All right. So again, you might have someone on your team, and some people have more confidence than others. I just saw the other day an ETR, an evaluation team report, in which one of the members signed that they disagreed with the denial of a 504 actually. So I was surprised. You don't see that very often because I don't even think the team members know that they can disagree a lot of times. So the more people that you bring to your meeting, the more people you have on your team as well. So one of the things that I want families to know, parents, you are the expert. No, you might not know how to measure, progress on a speech goal. Okay. You may not understand what every acronym means in the world of special education, but you know every detail of your child or the person that you're taking care of. You know when they woke up, you know what their favorite music is, you know what their favorite foods are, you know what they did last summer, you know who their most trusted people are, you know what makes them tick. There are so many things that a parent or a caregiver brings to the table that makes them an expert, and I want parents to own that and to really come to that table feeling like an equal team member, number one. And I feel like that can really help with the disputes. Um, so that's something definitely to know. But if you go through, these processes, if you're pushing back, again, it's free to say no. It is okay to bring anybody that you want to this meeting, right? And you feel like you've gone through those processes. There's a couple different resources, and we're not going to go into great detail. I'm going to do a time check really quick. I'm not going to go into great detail on any of these, but I'm going to show you where these resources live as we go further. All right. So there are ways that paths you can go down. And I just saw actually an email from the Department of Education and Workforce that said that the parents' rights has been updated. So there's a new version of that. A lot of times you're asked, I mean, you're legally required to be asked at every single meeting if you want a copy of your rights. And a lot of families say no. If they have a hard copy, say yes. Take the hard copy, put it in front of you, and just like flip through it and open it up to a couple of pages. Your awareness of this process and understanding that you have these rights is really important as a team member. Okay, so you have people that can help you. So to Brandy's point, you have the parent mentor. You can request before you get into the meeting if the parent mentor is available. I would do that earlier than sooner than later if you want that parent mentor to be available. Another resource is the Ohio Coalition for Education for Children with Disabilities. They also have mentors that I think are assigned by region and can be helpful. They have people who can also help with translation services. And if you go to their website, which we're going to look at in a second, they have a ton of resources on there as well. Um, there are lay advocates. Lay advocates are people that are not special education attorneys, but maybe special education experts, subject matter experts, and they can also help. And there is a group of lay advocates in the greater Cincinnati area. And then you have your special education attorneys and lawyers as well. So that is kind of your layers of people that help you with disputes. So start with the mentor. If you're having an issue with your district, then you can go from a mentor to a lay advocate. And then if you have to get into a due process situation, typically you're going to get an attorney involved. So you're this is the process on the Department of Education website, and there's a link to this. So if and this PowerPoint is also going to be available. So there's multiple options available: the early complaint resolution, facilitation, mediation, formal written complaint, due process complaint, and then an expedited due process. Look at that form, lots of terminology, right? Lots of processes that are confusing once again. And that is where your parent mentor or your lay advocate or your attorney can help you with those processes and understand. But again, not all families can afford an attorney, right? And if you reach an impasse, you can also request facilitation or mediation from someone from the state. And I have done this on multiple occasions, and it is helpful. It's someone who is not it is a non-biased person who is not on the side of the district and they're not on the side of the family. And they literally are just making sure with facilitation that the rules are being followed and the rights are being protected. All right. With mediation, this is something that you would get someone involved if you disagree, right? So if if someone's trying to change your child's placement, if they didn't qualify for extended school year services, if they're not qualifying them to go on into a transition program beyond their senior year. Mediation is when you would get someone involved who's actually going to do troubleshooting. Facilitation is checking the box of the process. Mediation is we need someone to help us figure out what the best solution is. All right. There's also the administrative review that is not on here. And the administrative review is when you have, exhausted the process with your district. At this point, you've asked the special education director for help. You're feeling frustrated by that. If you wanted to, and this is what the rights guide will actually guide you to do, they ask you to go to the superintendent and request administrative review before going to the state. Now, that is not required. There is not like you can't contact the state unless you've contacted the superintendent. That is not a required step in the process. But if you look at that, your legal rights document, you're going to notice that it says administrative review, and you're going to notice that it is not on this information chart. So an administrative review, you can request in writing that the superintendent get involved. And then from there, if you're not happy with that process or with that result, then you can move on to the Department of Education. There's a lot of variation in how people handle disagreements. All right. Some people go straight to the lawyer. All right. And some people don't. Some people go through all these different processes and try to really troubleshoot with their team before they hit a wall. Um, it's variable. This is a resource from Wright's Law, so just another resource out there. 12 ways to resolve parent school disputes. This is a pop-up, so like if you're to go to the website and actually click on these different pieces, they will take you to more resources. So you can see some nice scenarios on here that I think are great resources. So I don't agree with the school's proposed IEP. What should I do? And again, everybody, just so you know, the reason I'm not going myself into great detail with all of these things is because I really just want to provide you with as many resources to meet whatever individualized need you are looking at today. All right. So that's one example. My child's IEP isn't working. So I believe someone was talking like, how are we measuring progress? How do we know that there's enough minutes in place? So number two would address that. My child's IEP isn't working. How can I get the school to create an IEP with measurable goals? Number three, we had a comprehensive evaluation from a private expert. How can I get the school to use a recommendation from the evaluator? That's something that happens on a really regular basis. Number four, the IEP team says they only include academic skills in a transition plan. I know I guarantee there's people out there that are like, huh, yeah, this is happening because it's still happening. What is mediation? How does it work? How does a due process hearing work? What is prior written notice? Prior written notice anytime the school team is planning on doing something, changing services, making an amendment to services, the family needs to be notified. They cannot do that without including the family or the caregiver or whoever is the legal guardian. The team wants my child in general education with accommodations and she is failing. How can I get her placement changed? Can the IEP vote for a child's placement if the parents object? Can parents demand that an IEP member be excluded? And then the teacher and special ed supervisor are angry with my child's aide for talking about missed therapy services. They told her she cannot tell us anything that goes on at school. Again, these are common issues. And then the last is an effective IEP team a reality or an impossible dream? It's a process, all right? And it really takes teamwork and collaboration on the part of everyone. So if a parent goes in there in spirit of collaboration, but there's team members that are not there with that same spirit, that's going to impact your team dynamic, right? Um, Let me see. I'm looking at my notes to make sure that I am looking at this. Again, remember the most cost-efficient way to disagree is to say no. And I would joke around that parents would pay me an hourly rate because they were scared to say no to their team, right? Or they were scared that they were going to say no and that team was going to just completely reject them or, smack down their suggestions and things like that. But a lot of families had never even taken that first step to say, I don't agree with this, or this doesn't sit well with me, or I'm just not really sure how this makes sense as it applies to my kid, right? So asking for that additional explanation can lead to a really good conversation. Do I need an advocate or a lawyer? All right, so this is, again, not as black and white, but I try to make it as black and white as possible. All right, an advocate is a more cost-effective option. Typically, you're dealing with a very straightforward issue and resolved via negotiation or mediation. They might be around just to help improve or increase communication. And that's one of the pieces that I feel like I've helped with throughout the years is just making sure that we're communicating prior to the meeting so everybody knows what to expect. We're communicating after the meeting so that there's follow-up on those action items. If we haven't heard back from the team in 2 weeks, there's a follow-up that says, hey, can we get an update on those action items? And also just seeking a collaborative solution. I think using an advocate in those situations is a really good choice. And then for a special education attorney, of course, this is going to be more expensive. I would definitely recommend anytime a school district attorney is present that a family gets an attorney as well. And there are pro bono options out there as well as paid options. Anytime there is a due process hearing or legal proceeding, and seeking legal advice and or a resolution via court. So if you have a child with an IEP and you've received an expulsion letter, I think the fastest method a lot of times to put a stop or at least a pause on that process is to get a lawyer involved, unfortunately. But that's one of those situations that I feel like needs that level of support a lot of times. So I am going to open it up to Q&A, but let me actually go through my references and resources, and then we're going to move back to Q&A just in case that addresses anything. So the steps and processes slide, I put that handy dandy evaluation roadmap. So if you want to get lost in a flow chart, please feel free to do that. Or maybe if you have a suggestion on how to improve that flow chart so that it doesn't look like the cluster it is. The legal ruling slide, you're going to notice it comes from one of my favorite resources as an advocate, as a consultant, as someone who's just trying to figure out special education has been Wright's Law. It is an invaluable resource. You can Google almost anything and find more information or resources on Wright's Law. They also do provide trainings. The meeting preparation slide, those are IEP tips, strategies for parents to use before and after IEP meetings. This slide actually, I mean, it really, really, I don't know, I think it gets into a lot more resources. And COPA, which is the Council for Parent Attorneys and Advocates, has a ton of resources on their website that I would recommend that anyone who wants that support goes there. The dispute resolution slide, again, so you have one that is from the state of Ohio. And if you go to that link, if you click on that link and go, you're going to notice that it's really funny. It doesn't match the visual I showed you, but that's not uncommon. But there's lots of different resources on that website for dispute resolution, and it's going to tell you how to handle like requesting facilitation, how to handle requesting mediation, how to handle the different emails and phone numbers that you need to use for those as well. And then the Rights Law is just that IEP dispute pop-up that we just looked at over here. That's that last slide right there for dispute resolution. So, and Sadie, you are sending out the slides and those are linked on the website as well.
Yep, I was just gonna put that in the chat. I will get your slides and I will be sharing that in the recording of this, the slides, in my newsletter, on the recording just on YouTube, but then we will find a place on our website very soon. You'll have to bear with me when you deal with UC. Everything takes just a little bit longer at UC, but we'll make sure the resources will be available. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. So for resources, Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities, and I believe I saw someone from OCECD here. Disability Rights Ohio, and they have a great FAQ on their website that I would recommend you look at. Disability Rights Ohio is also a great place to contact if you are a family who needs a lawyer and cannot afford a lawyer, and they can share um, resources with you. There are also some pro bono attorneys out there that are willing to help. And then the ARC of Ohio, so Jen Powers Algie is our regional director, and she has just been so helpful, and not just with things with IEPs, but also OISPs. Aha, acronym. IEP is Individualized Education Plan, and the OISP is for individuals who qualify for DODD services, and that is Ohio's Individual Service Plan. I might be screwing that up, but basically OISP. She's been great. She is encouraging us, Sadie and I, if we're dealing with anyone who is worried about their rights or feels like they need help navigating processes, she has really encouraged us to have people contact her. So Jen Powers Algie is our regional director, and then she also works really closely with Gary Tonks, the state director, and they're working on, as you can imagine, all sorts of advocacy things right now. Um, Go to Cincinnati Children's Medical Center. It used to be the Special Needs Resource Directory. It's now called the Ongoing Support Resources. And if you see that link, it's got resources for financial, legal, and advocacy and reform. But if you go to that website, they also have camp resources, they have therapy resources, they have alternative educational placement resources. They have a ton of resources on there. And then, as you can see, the COPA, I just ended it there. COPAA, the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, great website, lots of resources. If there's one thing that I can say that is better today than used to be, is that we have a lot more resources out there, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. When I first started in this field and started working with families, um, it was the opposite. We didn't have enough resources. The internet was not the go-to resource, and people were still going to libraries to try to find information to help them. And now it's the opposite, where we're actually having to vet and make sure that these are credible resources, right? Um, Oh yes, there's a couple of additional resources in this PowerPoint. One of my favorite slides right here. So thank you, OCECD, for your downloads. I actually linked the acronym list that is bilingual. So not only do they have an acronym list, but they have acronym lists in different languages. How refreshing and wonderful is that? So who knows what APE stands for? Anybody? Just unmute and tell me. Adaptive physical education. What about FAPE? I know people, I know I got people on this call who know what FAPE is, right? Free and appropriate public education. Every student who is in public school is entitled. Entitled is the word that you need to remember, to a free and appropriate public education. After senior year and after 18, that entitlement changes to eligible. All right. And that goes for college, that goes for 504, that goes for ADA. You are no longer entitled, you are eligible. All right. LRE is least restrictive environment. Least restrictive environment means that the student is being placed in the environment that is going to meet their needs with the least amount of support needed, right? So that should start in the general education environment. Every single student should start in the general education environment, and then we add supports in that environment until we say, okay, we put all the modifications and accommodations in place, and it's not working in the general education environment. So then what do we do? What's our next step? You go to, now let's try the resource room for particular subjects, not all subjects, and see how they do with this. Every kid, again, it's going to be an individualized process, but when we are thinking least restrictive environment, at least philosophically, you should be starting out in the general education environment, adding modifications, adding accommodations, and then starting to back out and saying, all right, when should the child be pulled out of the general education environment, and what kind of support do they need? Way before you ever get to an alternative placement, all right? OHI. OHI is other health impairment. This is the bucket. basically for all the other disability categories are pretty specific, and OHI is the bucket where a lot of kids land. ADHD lands in here. Down syndrome can land in here. There's a lot of different things that can land in here. PBIS is positive behavior interventions and supports. There in every district, every meeting that you go to, someone is going to say this differently, somehow differently. And then SST is your state support team. So everyone who is in public school again, and even private school, you have a state support team that you can go to for support as well. And there are resources at that state support team. In our area, it's State Support Team 13. Very, very useful, full of resources. They put on trainings, they provide trainings to our public schools. They have parent advocates as well. It's another place to go if you need support and guidance. And then the last piece with people that can help you is we have area coordinators as well at the state level. So at Department of Education and Workforce, we have area coordinators, and we are Area 3, and those coordinators can be really helpful as well. These are a couple of other resources, frequently asked questions that come up when talking about the IEP. So again, just resources for you to look at and reference. What is the difference between direct versus consult? Really, really common question. So direct basically is that your kid is getting direct services, whereas indirect or consult means they are not getting direct services, but those services are benefiting them in some way. Indirect and consult sometimes, depending on a therapist, can mean that this is progress monitoring, data collection, or data analysis. It can be the creation of materials to support the student in different environments. It can be training or support for school personnel or the family as well. The difference between a benchmark and objective, another really common one. And a benchmark basically is how far they are supposed to go. So when you do benchmarks, you're like, they're going to have this amount of the skill by the first benchmark. They're going to have a larger amount of the skill by the second benchmark, and they're going to have an even larger amount of the skill by the third benchmark, right? So you're breaking down a larger into smaller. Whereas objectives, it might be if it's reading, like reading, for example, just a reading goal in general, the objectives would be breaking these things down. So objective 1 might be targeting reading fluency. The objective 2 is going to be reading comprehension. And objective 3 is going to be summarizing what was read, right? That would be an example of objectives versus benchmarks. And then the other commonly frequently asked questions is accommodations versus modifications. And I've got some examples on the next slide. So provide access, accommodations provide access to the course content, but do not alter or modify the complexity of that. Whereas modifications alter the course content and the expectations for those grade level indicators. That's the difference between an accommodation and a modification. Here are some examples of that. So individualized instruction would be on Algebra 2 would be an accommodation, right? Whereas we're going to give you access to a specialized math curriculum if it's a modification, all right? Those are just some examples. So now I'm going to go back in time to that slide. A lot of information in a short period of time. And there's so many of these topics that I could have taken and just did a presentation on. I know that some of you came worrying about your child's placement. Maybe there's a discipline issue, or you're worried about the number of the frequency, intensity of services, or maybe ESY is looming large right now. If ESY is looming large right now, or your child's transition to next year, what I'm going to tell you is put it in writing. Put it in writing, put it in writing. And it's okay. If the team doesn't agree, if you've already had a meeting, still put it in writing. Write it to your intervention specialist. If you have a relationship with a district rep or a principal, write it to them. Just get it in writing. And another piece that I want to bring up as well, that I talk to a lot of families who talk to me about issues and problems, but have not brought it to their school team. And again, if the school doesn't know that you have a concern or there is a problem, they cannot address that concern. So communication is imperative, and having open communication with your team is the best way to address those issues. Brandy, did I answer your question? I hope I did.
I think
That's right,
so.
paper trail.
I think you
We'll go
did.
it.
I
Okay.
just, I've heard a couple of things, and I have two school-age boys with IEPs, both on the spectrum, both global developmental delay, and I
That's a
don't
lot.
know. It is. And I don't know that I got what I thought I was getting from our parent advocate, and I think that's because I didn't know. Um, but then also you hear things about like this parent advocate is speaking poorly about the family to other members of staff. And so I was like, interesting.
Well,
Uh,
not parent advocate specific, but if this is gossip specific, if you
mm,
are in a group of people and there's somebody there gossiping about someone else, more than likely they gossip about you as well, right?
oh,
So
it was
you
like
can
a
kind of
check.
apply it in that situation as well. If
Yes.
you hear that a parent mentor is talking badly or poorly about one family, then they have the capacity to talk badly about families, right? And
Yeah.
they're not necessarily being mindful of the fact that that information gets around. So here's the thing. If you don't trust your parent advocate, Brandy, then you need to look for someone else. I would contact the OCECD, more than likely, Ohio Coalition for Education for Children with Disabilities. Their link is in there, or contact Jen Powers Algae. If you have two kids on an IEP, it is a lot to negotiate just with one kid. And I will just say that I would recommend that you bring someone with you to those meetings to help you with your bandwidth because it's just a lot. And again, it doesn't have to be someone who's a special education expert, just needs to be someone that you can have a talk with afterwards and be like, did that make sense to you? Or you might both look at each other and be like, what does these acronyms even mean? And then you're like, okay, all right, I'm not the only one there. Take someone with you though. I would definitely take someone with you, Brady. Maureen, yes, thank you, Maureen. If you have a verbal conversation, follow up with an email summarizing the conversation. And yes, paper trail, paper trail, paper trail. Your paper trail is so very, very important. Any other questions? There's so many comments that are happening in here and links. Thank you. Maureen is active. Maureen from the OCECD is active in
I
the
know, so glad you
chat.
attended. It was awesome. Like as you were talking, she was just like, link, link.
Maureen, that's beautiful. And that's exactly what this meeting is all about. I mean, seriously, this meeting is all about making sure that families and caregivers have access to the resources that they need to be able to support their kids the very best that they can.
No problem. Thank you for letting me add all the resources. Sometimes I like to just be like the behind the door Vanna White where I'm like, oh, they're talking about this. Let me throw
Yeah.
that in there because I have it
Nobody
up
hates Vanna
anyway.
White.
So
Nobody hates Vanna White, Maureen. She's still doing it after all these years. And you're
I
a
know.
girl after my own heart because I am also one of those people on this meeting. I know I recognize some names. They all are nodding. They're like, "Yep, she loves to drop things in the chat box." So the more resources, the better. Are there any questions or concerns? Any specific issues that are of the group that want to be brought up? Because this is a space for that as well. It's okay if there's not.
Is
So,
there a like a
um,
listserv or like something that gets mailed out with information from either both of you guys that like folks could sign up for?
Yes. So I send a monthly newsletter, a RAC newsletter, Regional Autism Advisory Council. If you drop your email in the chat, I can add you to my distribution list. And we host monthly community update meetings. So that's just a space where everybody is welcome to share updates in the community. And then we have this monthly advocacy and action meeting going on. And then I do also host training series, which we are about to launch a new one coming up on May 5th, all around supporting people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the workplace. So yeah, if you guys many of you, I think a lot of you are on my listserv here, but Maureen, I'll definitely add you. Yes, Irma, yes, anyone who drops their email in there, and if you did complete the poll as well, I'll drop your email in my distribution list so you guys stay connected.
Now, again, takeaways, know your basic rights, know what to do if you disagree, but more importantly, keep your cool. It's okay to say no. Get it in writing. Bring a witness. Those are the four things I would say, that those are all free. They don't cost any money, right? And can really help you feel like you can handle this meeting, can bring confidence and support in a way that you probably didn't realize you really needed before you had that in a meeting. So, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you so much, everybody. And I will be in touch. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Bye.